we're going to explore some incredibly fascinating ideas that will completely change how you look at the world around you. So let's just dive right into a super relatable question. Imagine you're standing in a crowded used car lot, or maybe you're scrolling online looking for a smart tutor. In a world totally packed with noise and marketing, how do you actually know who to trust? I mean, we're constantly having to make decisions without having all the facts, right?
Today, we are going to learn exactly how to decode all these mixed messages. By the time we wrap up this explainer, you'll have the mental tools to make much smarter, far more confident choices in your everyday life. Whether you're buying a new phone, hiring a teacher, or just listening to professional advice.
To do this, we've got to understand one core concept. Because buyers and sellers don't know everything about each other, we rely heavily on what economists call signals. Basically, a signal is something like a fancy university degree, a gorgeous website, or even a sky-high price tag that helps us guess the hidden quality of something. But, here's the catch. Not all signals are actually telling the truth.
So how do we solve this puzzle? Well, we use our first rule, the costly to fake principle. Think about it. A highly polished profile photo, that is super easy and cheap to fake. But 5 years of glowing customer reviews, now that takes real time and effort. The big takeaway here is we should really only trust signals that are difficult or expensive for dishonest people to copy.
Now, this principle also perfectly applies to professional advice. Stock analysts, real estate agents, or insurance salespeople might sound totally objective, right? Like they're just giving you the facts. But their incentives, their actual reasons for doing things, might not match your best interests at all. I mean, a salesperson might literally just push a product because it gets them a bigger bonus at the end of the month.
And that is exactly what you'll be tackling in your first workshop discussion. When these experts give us advice, how can we actually tell if they're genuinely trying to help us or if they're just, padding their own bank accounts? To help you brainstorm with your group, think about these directional answers. First off, always ask yourself, who really benefits if I say yes to this? You want to check if they're getting a hidden commission. And remember, sometimes an expert won't say anything negative simply because doing so would completely ruin their own business relationships. Okay, moving right along, appearance is another incredibly powerful signal, but it wildly changes depending on the job. For example, a lawyer might buy a flashy luxury car because clients judge them on wealth and success way before they ever see their actual legal skills. But a professor? They're judged by their teaching and their research, so appearance clearly matters a whole lot more in some professions than in others. This brings up a really fascinating debate for your group. Should people actually spend a literal fortune on luxury clothing, fancy cars, or expensive office decorations just to signal to everyone that they are highly competent at their job? When you sit down and discuss this, there are a few ways to look at it. You might argue that yes, it's a smart, completely necessary investment if your clients are absolutely going to judge you by your looks. On the flip side, you might argue no, it's just a huge waste of money that creates completely unnecessary financial pressure. Ultimately, you'll probably agree that it depends highly on the specific industry you work in.
Now, a super crucial point here is the language itself is also a signal. Have you ever been in a meeting where someone is just throwing around huge, complicated words, but you have absolutely no idea what they're actually saying? Sometimes complex language really does show deep expertise, but other times, it's just a smokescreen, a clever little trick to hide weak ideas when someone doesn't actually know what they're talking about.
So it is time to play detective in your next group discussion. When is complicated language actually helpful to the conversation, and when is it just a cheap trick to hide a total lack of knowledge?
Here's something to think about for your answers. If the topic is truly technical, like, say, advanced medicine, big words obviously make sense. But if everyone in the room is just confused and communication totally breaks down, well, that's a really bad signal. Just remember, a true professional's main goal is always to help others understand, not just to sound smart. Okay, let's switch gears and explore a very famous economic concept called the lemons problem. Now, a lemon is just slang for a terrible, broken-down used car. The idea is if buyers can't tell the difference between a good car and a bad car, they're obviously only going to offer low prices to protect themselves. But because prices drop, the sellers with actually good cars are going to leave the market. So eventually, only the bad stuff, the lemons, stays. This perfectly explains why markets for things like used phones or even dating apps can become so incredibly untrustworthy.
Knowing about this lemons problem, I want you to put yourself right in the buyer's shoes. Would you actually trust a private seller with your hard-earned money for something big, like a car or an apartment? What specific signals would actually make you trust them?
When you're tackling this one, think back to our golden rule about signals that are really costly to fake. You might tell your group that you'd look for a strong warranty, a totally official inspection report, or a positive long-term reputation. If it's something like an online course, maybe you'd demand verified identities and a free trial lesson before handing over any money. Finally, let's look at a truly fascinating concept called regression to the mean. Now, this is just a fancy academic way of saying that things usually bounce back to normal on their own. Imagine a worker has an unusually terrible week at the office. Their manager yells at them. The next week, the worker's performance just naturally returns to normal. But the manager completely confuses coincidence with cause and effect and falsely believes that their yelling is what magically fixed the problem.
This manager's mistake is incredibly common, which leads right to your final and arguably deepest discussion topic for the workshop. Do Taiwanese workplaces, schools, and families rely way too much on criticism simply because people mistakenly believe it works better than praise?
So the crucial point you can bring to your group is this. Yes, leaders often yell, they see that natural bounce back in performance, and they think their criticism was basically magic. And because of this illusion, we constantly overestimate the power of blame, and we completely underestimate the amazing long-term benefits of positive encouragement.
To wrap up this explainer and get you fully ready for the workshop, remember the big lesson here isn't that you should just wildly distrust everyone. Not at all. You just need to slow down and ask yourself these 3 golden questions. 1. Is the signal costly to fake? 2. Does this person have hidden incentives? And 3. Am I simply confusing a coincidence with cause and effect? You are now fully equipped to decode the noisy world around you. Have an absolutely fantastic time discussing these concepts at the Knowledge English Workshop.
Join Beyond Norm Knowledge Workshop to master English and stay ahead in your career.